Hello and welcome to Carnivore Wellness. My name is Rebecca, and today I want to share with you why I regretted starting the carnivore diet. All right. That's a little bit of a dramatic way to put it. I don't regret starting the carnivore diet, but I did go through a period of time where I wished I could go back and unlearn everything I had learned up to that point. And I want to talk to you about that because I think it's really important and I think a lot of people go through this. I went through a period of time around the 3-month mark where I got really mad about going carnivore. When first starting a ketogenic diet, which I did prior to starting carnivore, I dove into the science and I learned all about how our bodies are really designed to run in ketosis and to run on ketones, that the ketones are better for the brain and, better for our metabolic functioning, that it's a cleaner fuel source for our bodies so that we have less oxidative stress in our bodies, which can promote inflammation and lead to long-term chronic disease and illness. So in learning all of that, I knew that there was no going back to a standard American diet, but I still struggled with keto as a sustainable way of eating because I had to do a lot of tracking and I still really suffered with a lot of cravings. So when I started carnivore, I figured, well, this is the next step. It's a ketogenic diet and it's the next step in me trying to figure out a sustainable way of eating. And at first it was great. I really loved it. I had pretty much immediate relief of cravings. My hunger and appetite was quickly regulated and I felt very good. I noticed a huge reduction in anxiety and, a reduction in depression very quickly along with a bunch of other noticeable benefits. I felt amazing and really leaned into this new way of eating as something that felt right. And, I started to learn even more. Just as I had taken time to educate myself on the science around a ketogenic diet, I did the same thing for a carnivore diet. Like you, I imagine if you found my video, you spend a good amount of time on YouTube listening to others in this carnivore space and learning all you can from them. And so I did that as well. I also read several books that helped me get a better understanding of the science behind why a carnivore diet is so good for us, why plants and seeds and things like that are not great for us and how they can interfere with our body's absorption of minerals and nutrients and lead to inflammation. So I really armed myself with knowledge and carried on forward in my carnivore journey with a lot of confidence that this is indeed the optimal way for humans to eat. And that was great for quite a while. In my early days of carnivore, I gave up a lot of my coping mechanisms because they were not carnivore. So I gave up coffee, which I had heavily relied on. Of course, I gave up sugar because I was no longer eating, anything that wasn't a carnivore food. So I gave up the sugar. That was a big coping mechanism for me. And I gave up marijuana. I had been a daily smoker of marijuana for quite some time, especially in the postpartum period of my life, because after having 2 kids, I really suffered with postpartum anxiety and depression. And I found that using marijuana helped me kind of come back down from a really ragey, irritable, high-strung place to a place where I could be a lot more calm and grounded with my kids. So, yeah. Not winning any Mother of the Year awards over here, but I did use that for a time. But I knew it's a plant and honestly it needs to go. It's not going to help benefit me in the long run. And I really was leaning into this idea of using carnivore as a healing modality and a healing first approach to overall bettering my health. So I gave up all those coping mechanisms and that was really hard. Like the physical giving up of the coffee was challenging. The physical giving up of the marijuana less so because something shifted in my brain and it no longer affected me the same. So it kind of that was easier to kick. But I did often long for that changed state in mood. There were many times where I thought, oh, this would be so much more enjoyable if I were stoned. Or, I wish I'd feel some strong emotion, anger, frustration, something that I didn't want to sit with, some kind of emotion that was hard to process. And I really wanted to step outside and take a puff because I wanted to alleviate that feeling. but I couldn't do that. And then, of course, I no longer had sugar. I always turned to sugar as a way of distracting myself or numbing out or just a nice pick me up, a little boost in my mood, or I'd use it as a little motivational treat or something. Oh, I've earned this. And I no longer had sugar to use as that coping mechanism either. And I guess I will also say, back when I started keto, I also at that point eliminated alcohol, which up to that point had been a really big coping mechanism. I, drank alcohol every day, pretty much always, except when I was pregnant. And so I had given up the alcohol. So I had no more of these things that I had used in the past to lean on for coping mechanisms, to change my mood, change my mindset, or just as an activity, something to do. I mean, I still to this day miss the ritual of sipping a warm cup of coffee in the morning to start my day. But I know that coffee doesn't serve me for my own reasons. It's not very good for me hormonally, and it doesn't help the fact that I am prone to having, anxiety. So I'm happy that I've eliminated it, but I went through a period of time around the 3-month mark where I got really, really mad about going carnivore. And it's very strange because I'd already experienced so many benefits, and I knew, and I could tell from my own firsthand experience that this way of eating was something totally different, that it is not just a diet, it's not just a trend or a fad, but that this is the way to eat. And I felt that very deeply in my body and in the way that it responded to this anti-inflammatory way of eating. But I went through, what I would call a period of grief. And I think this is very common for new carnivores, in realizing that I no longer had access to those coping mechanisms, that those didn't serve me anymore. I suddenly had to come face to face with who I was and how I show up in the world. So when I would get irritated or frustrated, I couldn't just step outside and take a puff of weed. I couldn't just go crack open a beer and wash down this icky feeling with something cold and refreshing. Instead, I had to sit with my emotions and process them like a grown-up, like an emotionally mature grown-up. And up until this point, I had not wanted to do any of that. I think a lot of us carry a lot of wounds from childhood. We carry maladaptive coping mechanisms and behaviors and a lot of self-limiting beliefs. And we carry these with us in life. And then it's okay. You can kind of bury some of these things deep down until all of a sudden you can't. And for me, carnivore was that point where all of a sudden I could not continue to push these things out and away from me. I had to deal with them. And it spurred on a lot of, personal reflection, which was really hard because I didn't always like what I saw. When I reflected on who I was, how I was showing up for my kids, the way that I was being a supportive spouse or not, or, just my own mental dialogue with myself, I didn't always like it. And as I came up to some of these, limiting beliefs, I really struggled to kind of go back in my past and in my history and figure out where they came from and to work on healing those parts of myself. There's a big push in today's, therapy-based world about healing the inner child. And it can sound all wooey, and I understand if you don't want to do that. I get it. I didn't want to do it either. But there is nothing more triggering for your old childhood wounds than to have young kids and suddenly see some of those things that you used to do reflected in your children. And then your reactions to those things. Where do those reactions come from? Well, when you go and you dig back in your childhood, you start to see, that was something I had to deal with as a kid. And it can be really hard and really painful to go uncover some of that stuff. So for me, that was part of this period of really wishing I could unlearn everything I had. But I couldn't. I had taken time to learn the science behind carnivore and why it's so effective and why it works and why it's optimal for health and nutrition. And I couldn't get that information out of my mind, but there was a time where I really wanted to. And I remember expressing these feelings out loud to my husband. And, because also this way of eating does indeed affect your social interactions with people. And yes, there are ways that we can work around it. We can eat ahead of time before we go to a social event. We can bring our own food. We can just decide that we're not going to, partake in anything. But it does shift the way that you interact with people. Birthday parties come up and suddenly you're not eating the slice of cake that your child wants you to eat for their birthday. Or, my husband and I, our go-to activities for, a fun activity as a family would be to go out to dinner, go get a meal, go get Mexican, go to a brewery or something. And we no longer did that because I wasn't going out to eat and that wasn't where I wanted to spend my time socially. But we had this kind of gap in our daily activities where we didn't know what to do instead. So it was a challenge for relationships, both with my kids and my husband. And honestly, my social circle was very small at that point because I was, coming out of a very crippling level of social anxiety. So it's not like I had a big friend group to contend with or anything, but I did still see that impact on my social life. And so that was another challenge and another thing that I was kind of frustrated with carnivore about. What do you mean I can't go out and eat these foods, or I can't, go on a simple date or just kind of relax and cut loose and have a fun night out? But those things weren't in line with my health goals, and they certainly weren't in line with what I had learned about as far as optimizing our health and nutrition. So again, wished I could have dumped all this information out of my head and gone back to my ignorant place of bliss. In some ways, eating the carnivore diet was like eating the forbidden fruit. Suddenly I had this knowledge and awareness, and you can't unknow it. So there was a big shift in my relationship, both with myself and others. And it really took a lot of personal growth and personal work. So during this time, as I was still continuing to absorb a lot of carnivore information, I also really started diving into the self-help books, the self-improvement, kind of personal discovery books, and began really trying to seek out information on how to cope better, how to manage my feelings and emotions, how to get past limiting beliefs. And I did a lot of this through my reading, and it did help tremendously. I was also during this time journaling, and I'm sure I could go back and find a journal entry right now where I'm saying, I wish I didn't know what I know now, because I reflected on it so often. But I really had to do the hard work of sitting with these feelings and processing them. And I wish I could just tell you just really quickly, just think about life like this, or just think about carnivore like that. But at the end of the day, you got to wrestle with it and you got to make peace with it. And the only way to do that is by sitting with the emotions that it brings up for you. So, you go through the stages of grief, denial, I won't have to eat like this forever. It's just for a period of time. Well, you keep saying that, but once you get the benefits of this way of eating, you really don't want to go back, or at least most folks don't. I personally don't. And then you go through anger. I wish I didn't have to eat this way. I wish my body wasn't so broken that this was the only solution. And then bargaining. Okay, well, maybe I'll be able to, reintroduce some foods and feel fine. I mean, personally for me, I know my digestive health, my hormonal health, I doubt this is possible for me. Maybe it is. I don't know. But, you go through that bargaining, or, maybe I'll only have, this type of food at this occasion, or, maybe I'll have, a couple times where I, deviate and that'll be okay. And then that fourth stage of grief, depression, just straight up being mad about it, being upset about it, feeling low. I remember having those feelings. I remember feeling like, man, I so want to disconnect from where I am right now. I feel so angry. I feel so upset. I feel so low, and I have such low, kind of just a low mood. And it really did feel like depression. But I felt that way because I knew I couldn't turn to my coping mechanisms that I'd used in the past. And I had to just sit with it. And so that's where that fifth stage of grief comes in, that acceptance. And that is the biggest gift that you can give yourself, is that self-acceptance, that self-love, just knowing that indeed, in the end, you're going to be okay, and that this is for your best and greatest good. This way of eating is optimal for health and nutrition. It's optimal in so many ways. It has given me back my life and given me a life that I didn't know I would ever be able to tap into. I was at a really, really low point before starting carnivore, and especially before keto, but it was terrible. I would not wish it on my worst enemy. The mental anguish and agony that I was in, and the hormonal dysregulation, but really, by and large, the anxiety and depression and the way that it significantly affected me. I would never, ever want to go back to that. So even though I had to go through this process of grieving the loss of my old life, of grieving the loss of those former coping mechanisms, of grieving the loss of, the activities that I would enjoy with other people, it was well worth it to work through that process with journaling, with reading, with talking with loved ones, and really just being willing to sit in those hard feelings of self-reflection. it was so worth it. And I now have this new awareness in my life. Food is fuel. Food is not entertainment. It's not a comfort. It's not there to make me feel better, on an emotional level. It's there to nourish my body so that I can then do and be the best I can be. I am going to choose having a social life and connections with other people over food. I used to go to events where the food was the primary focus and that's all I was thinking about. But now I go to social gatherings and events, and I'm just so excited to connect with other adults and, or people, whoever is there, but especially adults, since I've been a stay-at-home mom to young kids for so long. And I really relish that time with others much more than I ever enjoyed the spread of food that would be available at those kind of events. And I also know that this is optimal for health. I am actively preventing chronic disease and inflammation. I do not want to develop type 2 diabetes. I do not want to develop obesity. I do not want to develop cardiovascular health issues and have a heart attack or have a stroke. I don't want that for myself. And I know that this way of eating is going to be so incredibly helpful in preventing that metabolic dysfunction, because instead this way of eating is very metabolically supportive. And this also translates over into mental disease and disorders. I don't want dementia. I don't want to lose who I am as a person as I grow older. I don't want to accept cognitive decline as something that is inevitable. I refuse to accept that for myself. Therefore, I know this way of eating is going to be the most powerful antidote to having that be my fate. It may be the fate of the vast majority of our non-carnivore peers, but it does not have to be our fate. We can choose something different by eating in a way that is nutritionally appropriate for our bodies, and that is what I choose. So it's been a transition to come out of that time of feeling that grief and that anger and that frustration with carnivore and wishing I could go back to the simple, blissful pleasures of indulgence. But it was all for hedonistic purposes. It was all for just in that moment pleasure. It wasn't in any way helping me in the long term. If anything, those brief, fleeting moments of pleasure left me feeling even worse, as I moved into the future. So that's not what I wanted for myself. And I'm so thankful that I found this way of eating. I'm so thankful to all those who I've learned from. And that's why I'm here to share with others. It's really important that we don't accept this lesser way of living for ourselves just because it's the status quo for most others. Instead, we can use this diet for health and healing, and that then allows us to step into our full power, our full potential, so that we can be the people we want to be and show up for others in the spaces where we want to show up for them, and be that example and be that light for others. So that is one of the main reasons that I'm here sharing now, and it's also one of the key reasons that I've developed the Carnivore Wellness community. So if you want to join a group of like-minded meat-based eaters anywhere on your anywhere on your carnivore diet journey, if you're keto, if you're carnivore, ketovore, animal-based, wherever you fall on the spectrum, if you're just interested in what this is all about, I'd welcome you to join that Carnivore Wellness community. There's a link down below. Lots of great free resources to get you started, including a comprehensive free e-course on how to get started with carnivore with confidence. Walks you through everything you need to know about what to eat and when to eat, and all sorts of things to expect along the way, as well as clearly defining some paths forward for you as you navigate that. I also host weekly lives within the community where anyone is welcome to show up, ask questions, bring up topics of interest, and just provides us with a way to connect with one another in that live community space. There's also, for those of you who want to take it a step further, I've developed a monthly commitment membership space where you can come and join, have access to 3 weekly meetings, these live Zoom calls where all of us get together, we chat, we share what we're dealing with, what we're going through, share the ups and the downs and everything in between. It's a great source of support, accountability, encouragement, and hope as we transform our lives on this carnivore-based way of eating. So if that sounds like something for you, that link is down below. I would love to have you there in that space. It's very supportive and uplifting and really helps us with these harder things, especially the personal growth side of things. We definitely give you the information you need about how to do carnivore and, navigate the physical things that you might come up against. But this Carnivore Wellness community also has a big focus on the personal growth and development side, because that always occurs alongside significant life change. So I wanted to create a place where that is welcome and encouraged. So if that sounds like the place for you, please come join us. If you found this helpful, interesting, or if you have any comments of your own that you'd like to share, please comment those below. Have you gone through a period of grief as you've navigated carnivore? I think it's a lot more common than maybe we want to speak up about. So was there a time period in your carnivore journey where you kind of got frustrated with it, or you wanted to ditch it and go back to the simplicity of life on a standard American diet? Perhaps not. Share that in the comments below. And also, if you would, please like and subscribe. Thank you all so much for your time today. I hope you have a wonderful day and eat lots of meat.